Hello. So I'm back with one more video to end the year. And if you're new to this channel, I don't drop videos very often. I pretty much make this announcement every time that I make a video. And it's pretty much when I feel like I have something that's valuable to say, or I can uh, introduce a new technique, tool, or exercise that could be helpful uh, to anybody who's trying to figure out certain things to do with their writing. With this one in particular, you know, I've made some videos that I didn't really like in terms of I didn't really think they added too much. So what I'm kind of doing here is doing a combination of three videos in one. And, you know, the first thing I'll talk about is an exercise that will be helpful to anybody that is starting out and they feel like they're too cluttered with ideas. This is also helpful for anybody that is more experienced, but maybe is in a bit of a rut. Then we're going to talk about AI. Um, Obviously, that's a big thing. And then also just how to stay motivated in terms of your writing. That's kind of a recurring theme with a lot of videos I do is sort of the mental aspect of motivation and things you can do to help yourself stay on track and build a routine and have consistency in your writing and develop that sort of habit and muscle. So we're going to cover those three things. I know I've been trying to make different types of videos that I've mentioned, uh, but I kind of scrapped those. One of them being the hero's journey, mainly because I would do the video, I would make it, it would be too much like a video essay, which I wanted to avoid. And then the other thing is that I didn't feel like I was providing too much new information that you couldn't find just off of like an article somewhere that just kind of breaks it down. So I still might do something if I can think of a unique way of approaching it. But as of right now, that and a few other videos that I kind of did some like half recordings of them, I'm going to scrap. Anyways, without further ado and stop rambling, we're going to get into something that I call the idea box. You can also call it the story box. And it is a exercise that helps you organize and simplify in a very neat way to package your ideas, especially if you're somebody that you feel like you have tons of ideas and you don't really know how to organize them. So on the screen, I'm going to put a basically a screenshot of what that looks like. This is essentially the what I'm showing on the screen is like the full on idea box template of what it looks like. Obviously, it represents a box that's unfolded, and you can see the six panels, the four sides, and then the top and bottom. And I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'll put a link in the description of a download. You can download a PDF and a Word doc version. So the Word doc one you can actually like type in it. And but I suggest that you really just kind of have you can really just get a piece of paper and draw it yourself, or just have a copy, like a printout copy or whatever on your laptop, and with a piece of paper fill in the panels. The idea of that is that you have, in the screenshot, which I'll show again, you have the top and the bottom panels, which represent the theme. The top panel of the box really is, the kind of the first thing that you are discovering, and then the bottom panel is holding everything together from falling out. And that's both a literal and a sort of metaphorical purpose of it. And then, of course, you have your four panels. Now, the four panels, the way I titled them, is really just for reference points. It's not so much like Bible. I think that's the thing that I always say a lot. Nothing is really scripture or Bible here. It's more or less just this is the example we're using. But overall, you want to kind of stick to the general setup of what we're doing. So, with that top panel, you are going to try to establish your theme. And one of the best things that I've always heard that has always been consistently helpful is simplify your theme into one word. This is a Francis Ford Coppola technique. What you can say whatever you want about him as a filmmaker currently, but obviously his early work kind of speaks for itself. So with that top panel in the box, and the idea is when you put this box together, when you put the panels back into forming a box, like you're able to carry those ideas and organize them. And you will see with each idea how really, like, how much weight they hold, like literal creative weight. And the stuff that is the heaviest is going to um, be the stuff that you should probably focus on. Things that seem very light, they probably need to develop more. And creative weight is like an intuition thing. Like, this is where we get kind of like holistic, even though I hate using that word. But you should be able, like I always say, a great idea feels like a boulder in your brain. Like, you just can't shake it, while a weak idea is like a pebble. So it's the same kind of concept with this. That top panel, again, that's going to be the top thing that's kind of closing everything together, with the bottom holding it all together. So that top panel, you want to establish your theme and what you're really going for. Now, the idea of this idea box is that you should be able to fill out every panel. If you can't, you go back to the box and you fill it. You continue to fill it till it's heavy and it has weight. And if you feel like you can't go back to the box and figure out a theme or figure out an act two or of what you see there, then you should probably get rid of it. It's probably junk. And you want to think of your brain, your mind, your creative like skull as a house. And you don't want to be a hoarder. You don't want to just have a bunch of ideas piling up. You have to be able to let go and get rid of things that don't really have that much value. So that top panel, you figure out your theme. Let's say it's revenge, right? This whole thing is about revenge. I'm going to use a pretty really good example that's probably not fair. I hate using like popular successful movies because it almost makes it seem um more like it's like an unfair usage. Because if you use a successful movie, of course it's going to make it seem like it's a lot easier to utilize than it is. Not saying it's hard to do this idea box, but it takes some effort and work. So, like with the movie Seven, you could say that the theme, there's many themes, but you really want to look at the biggest theme of it. So obviously, religion plays a theme. Like violence and crime can play a theme, but let's just say, for the sake of simplicity here, it's like morality. Like, where morality is a big theme in Seven. Okay. And so that top panel is going to be morality. And by default, the bottom panel is also going to be morality. In the PDF that I provide in the Word doc, it's going to have things written in each panel to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about, a little bit more explanation and context, right? So let's say it's focused on morality. And with Seven, obviously the morality aspect isn't as blurred as, let's say, you would say like Crime and Punishment, the novel, right? That, has ideas of morality, or Brother Karamazov, or really anything of like a Dostoevsky type thing. But morality is a big deal. So then in the panel closest attached to that is basically your intro or prologue. And with a story, even though I'm using Seven, which is a film, as an example, this idea box is for just story writing, story development, whether it's screenwriting or a novel, okay? Or a short story. So that intro and prologue is focused on the microcosmic world of your character. So, like, let's say, or your protagonist, I should say. So me as a protagonist, let's say I'm the protagonist story. My microcosmic world is literally this house, like everything that's going on in this house, maybe my job, whatever, right? So that's that first panel. And you're going to focus on introducing that. It's sort of a prologue into the story because you're not really getting too much into the story or plot. Don't get too hung up on those titles. Like I said, it's just a way to keep track. So, that intro / prologue can be quite a bit of writing. It could be quite a bit of story development. Depends how much you want your reader, your audience, to really be absorbed in this person's microcosmic world. Now, the next problem panel attached to that is Act One, essentially. And that is going to be the macrocosmic world. You're building on the world around me. So it's sort of like the economic state of the world around me, the things that I have the least control of, essentially. And that's where you're really going to build into understanding sort of the conflicts and obstacles that arise in that, in your story. Okay. And so at this point, you can introduce an antagonist, but ideally, I would say wait until Act Two, or this, the third panel, but essentially would be the fourth panel overall. But it's the third panel of the main, like, connected ones. Okay, so that's going to be Act Two, and that's where basically chaos happens. You've already done the intro, the prologue, introduced the protagonist's microcosmic world. You've developed that, and then going into Act One, it's the macrocosmic, the greater world around them, and sort of the conflicts and the obstacles that they're going to face or that are kind of intruding on them. Act Two is where the antagonist really comes along. And the antagonist can be a literal character, a singular character, or it can be something more cosmic. But it's antagonizing the protagonist. And essentially what that is it causes chaos. So that Act Two is like where all hell breaks loose. Think of it that way in your story. Whether you're writing a fantasy novel or you're doing a film, at that Act Two, in that panel, it should be chaos. Act Three is order. So the thing I want to make very clear on that on that fourth panel in the main strip, order does not mean resolution per se or victory for the protagonist. It just means order, which is why I want to use Seven as an example. Because with Seven, you have the theme of morality. And then in the intro prologue, you have the introduction of the protagonists, which is Morgan Freeman, primarily him, Brad Pitt, sort of their microcosmic worlds. Morgan Freeman's getting ready to retire. Brad Pitt is married, and that is a thing that's starting to become a centerpiece of his life, like being a married man now. And then you have Act One, where we see the macrocosmic world, where there's a serial killer on the loose, killing people based on the deadly sins. And then Act Two is where chaos happens, where really a lot of the cat and mouse game happens in the movie. Act Three is basically when order happens. The killer, played by Kevin Spacey, is captured. He's not really captured. He turns himself in. Spoiler, sorry. And ultimately, order is restored because he is killed by Brad Pitt. So obviously, in the sense of that movie, there's no real victory. Like, they don't catch the killer and put him away for good. It actually, ends bad. That story ends poorly not poorly as in like quality wise, but it ends bad for the characters, the protagonists. But order is essentially restored because everything that was chaotic has now found a new place. It's been organized. And then we have the sort of the theme at the bottom, which is, again, the concept of morality. Did Brad Pitt's character do the right thing when given the context of why he did it? So you can see how that idea is fully formed. And with this idea box, it's not so much about writing out very fleshed out or very detailed panels. You can, if you'd like, but the reason why it's restricted in that panel, because you can only fit what you can fit in those boxes, those panels. And if you're unable to really find simple, direct, concise ways of explaining each of those things in the idea that you have, then most likely the idea, one, isn't fully developed enough in your brain just naturally to pursue and continue, but it also just may not be a very good idea or as strong as idea as you thought. Because a lot of ideas are very one-dimensional. Like, we think, oh, that could be a great story, and then when you really take time to sit down and flesh it out, you realize there's not much to it. So that idea box really helps you figure out how much there is to this idea. And as you have if you have 7, 8, 9, 10 ideas in your head and you don't really know what to do with them, do an idea box with each of them And I guarantee you half of them you're going to see very clearly that they're not worth keeping packaged and stored in your brain, and you can get rid of them. And you can just get up, throw them away. They're not worth keeping. And then the other 5 you can start narrowing it down from there. Me personally, I try not to have more than 2 or 3 ideas at a time that I'm serious about. If I have more than that I feel or that I know are worth exploring, I really just kind of store them away far away. And until I finish those 2 or 3 ideas, um, and get like a full script done or a short story done or whatever I need. Sometimes I use ideas as practice. I'll write a story just to keep, my skill sharp. Um, until I get all of that organized, then I'll go and look at the other ideas I have in my idea box. Now, as you do this more often, you won't need this template as much, and it'll be more natural for you to understand and know if an idea is worth exploring, just because you've already trained yourself to know how to like filter through these ideas. So that's how the idea box works. It's very simple. The amount of time it took me to kind of explain it and break it down, it should take you that long as well to, package an idea and see if it's worth it. So it's really not a time consuming thing. You can easily do, you know, a ton of these of a ton of ideas that you have within an hour. You could do like 3 or 4 of them easily. So I highly recommend, if you're struggling with getting your ideas really organized and seeing what's worth uh, their weight to keep, give this a try. I'm really confident it could be helpful to you. Now, moving on, just right into it, is moving on to like AI and how AI is something that is obviously the big talking point nowadays. And I think it's important to understand um, AI from just many different perspectives. One, I don't use AI not because like I'm against it or anything, but for me, writing is like, for me personally, it's a craft and an art form. I understand if somebody's not a writer, the need to use AI is going to be very enticing and legitimate for them, because they're not thinking in terms of craft and artistry. And to me, that's okay, that's fine. The big thing that people are worried about and legitimately scared about is like AI taking over the artistic aspect and the creative aspect of writing. So the way that I look at it, I've mentioned this before. I've been a pizza chef for almost 15 years, right? In parallel to me working off and on freelance writing and film and all that. A lot of pizzerias I worked at also serve pasta, and you have a lot of people that I've seen that are they can make pasta from scratch, and they can also make pasta from hand. They can make the shapes and everything, but most of them use a pasta making machine, because the scale and volume that they would need to do, it would just take too long, and it's just not physically doable. You can look at that pasta machine as AI, because it's creating the shapes and the forms based on little things that you input, and it does it really quick and easy, and you almost can't even decipher it from if it were made by hand. You can, but you can't, depending how hard you're looking. And AI is essentially that, because you could say, when that pasta machine was invented and it was like, look, you can make all these pasta shapes in a tenth of the time that you would if you made by hand, the big fear was like, oh, every pasta maker is going to be out of work. But that's not the case. In fact, a lot of master pasta makers use pasta making machines. So the way that I see it is that, from whatever angle you want to look at it, AI is either it's always going to be a tool, I think, for a creative person to use. Um, new technology is always going to have major pushback and be seen as something that is a threat to the integrity of any creative and art endeavor. But if you want to say that, then you have to say that about modern editing software and modern like photo design software, Photoshop, DaVinci, all of those are all digital, forms of editing that have made editing photo and video so much more streamlined and easier than it was when you had to take the actual film and by hand edit it, or when you had to paint something, draw something by hand and do that. Um, so even 20 it's been 25 years or so plus years since those softwares have really come out and become commercial use. Painters are still around, drawers are still around. Even when you look at 3D and visual effects in film, from like Jurassic Park onward to Avatar, um, for many many years there were still practical effects, you know being made and used. What ultimately has really crushed the film industry and creative endeavors isn't tools or technology that is created to make things easier or to replicate something made by a human. It's always comes down to corporate and capitalistic um, pursuits of, like, basically greed. Because companies are more than capable of having it both ways. They could hire people to do things and also have those people use AI in a meaningful way. They can have somebody hire somebody as a writer to write a a bunch of pages of whatever. It could be a screenplay, uh documentations for, their corporate branding, all of that. And then they can also say, hey, run it through AI and see what you can get in terms of feedback or something like that. You could very much do that, but corporate companies won't do that. They'll not hire the human and they'll try to replicate everything through AI. So at the end of the day, the problem isn't really AI. It's goes back to corporate and capitalistic greed. Because new technology is going to come here whether you like it or not, and you can't fight it. And fighting the technology isn't the problem, it's the symptom. It's really comes down to the executive level and how much they're going to want to save money, even though they already make hundreds of billions, some upwards of trillions of dollars. So when it comes to AI, the way that I look at it is, while AI may ultimately reduce and harm a lot of the job market in film and screenwriting and even in fiction writing. One, if you are a writer at your core, it should not matter because you should be doing writing regard. Like, I'm going to write stories, screenplays, whether or not I get paid, and I'm going to do it until I die. Whether I have a career from it or not, like a full on career, it's always going to be something that I do. So that's why it, like, the thought of AI doesn't even register in my brain in terms of it being a threat, because it's not going to take away my ability to sit down and write a story when I feel like writing a story. That is just something that I do because it is generally a passion for me. There's a lot of people who do writing as a career. It's not a passion for them, even though they may be involved in screenwriting and it's a creative endeavor and they enjoy the creative aspect of it. If there's no career for them in that, they just aren't going to write screenplays anymore. And in my opinion, that you're probably not a real, like, a writer at your core. You're probably somebody who likes writing, but you're just not a writer, because a writer is going to write regardless of the circumstances of whether they get paid for it or not. You look at every great writer, novelist, screenwriter, any of that, every single one of them just wrote because they needed to. It was a personal desire and necessity for them. It was like food, like they need to do it to survive from a spiritual aspect. um and it's the same for me. Like, I cannot, if I go a month without writing, I start to go fucking insane. And if I had to choose between writing a script and they were going to pay me money versus writing my own script and I wasn't going to get paid for it, but I was going to really enjoy it, I would choose my script every single time. So when it comes to AI, it's basically, where do you stand? Is this a career or is this a livelihood for you, in terms of, you have to, like, writing is in your blood. If it's in your blood, it's not going to matter, because out of the tens of millions of writers, only a very, very small percentage are ever going to be able to make it a career for their entire lives. Most people are going to have moments where they can have a career, maybe for a few years, and then it'll fizzle out. That's just the reality of it. Secondly, I just see AI as just another version of writers that are utility writers. And those are writers where, and I'm going to use film as an example, where a producer says, write X, Y, and Z, and they sit down and write X, Y, and Z. They don't really come up with anything. They're not actually creative. They think they are, but they're not. But they're utilities. They're essentially a fleshy version of AI. They're prompted something and they do as they're prompted. And that's all AI is. So it's just another form of that type of writer. And most of those writers get the jobs over the people who try to come up with their own creative thing, whether it's good or bad, because deeply creative types are not good at just doing prompt work. Like, deeply creative people, or who have a desire to be creative, aren't going to really listen to a producer when they tell them, especially if they think it's bad or they have a better creative idea. So that's how I see AI, is like, oh yeah, it's just the pixel, or not the pixel, but the binary version, the 00110 version of the typical writer that's always been the primary writer in the, getting the jobs, where they're told to jump and they ask how high. So I don't see it as any worse than that, because it's just another tool that's being prompted to write something that a producer wants them to write, or that somebody who doesn't really want to pay that much to write. Obviously, I know there's writers like that, they get paid millions and millions of dollars, but again, those are people that aren't even, I don't consider them vastly, deeply creative writers at their core. They may think they are, especially since they have a career out of it, but I don't think any of them would be writing if they weren't making millions of dollars from it. So there's that. And then, of course, the last thing, how do you stay motivated going into the year? Uh, for myself, it's just routine. I think creating a routine. I worked really hard this last year and a half to get myself in a place, job wise, where I have really good financial stability. And it took a lot of sacrificing my own writing sometimes to get there. But now that I'm there, it has made the ability for me to routinely write more better. And because of that, I've been able to finish more projects this year. As much as I want to do more YouTube stuff, it's, again, I don't want to spend all my time talking about writing when I can spend a lot of my time writing. So, and I think that's a really healthy balance, because I'm not trying to be a YouTuber. And I think for us to stay motivated, we have to not lose sight. Like, what is it? You have to see the forest from the trees. We can't lose sight of what we're really trying to do. And I also hope that some people that are watching this may come to the realization, like, oh, I'm not really like a writer at my core. I'm just kind of, this is something I'm interested in because I think I can make a career and make money off of it, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that is something to be aware of, because you also have to understand, like, if it's not something that you wouldn't be doing unless you had the chance to make a career out of it, then you have to be ready to walk away sooner rather than later, because it's very, very difficult. And it's even more difficult to get a career out of this than it ever was. And so I think that's the other thing too, for anybody watching this, that you believe you're a core writer, that you don't get lost in the sauce of trying to make a career out of this all the fucking time. I'm trying to make a career out of this, but I know when to take a step back and be like, you know what, I'm gonna not focus on that right now. I'm just gonna focus on enjoying the love of the game of just what is writing, and writing short stories, and taking my notepad out and, writing away for an hour or so, and just enjoying and doing what I love. So I think, in terms of staying motivated for this year, really, 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 it's repetitive and it's a broken record, but you have to sit down and you have to fucking write. Like, you can do all these exercises, do all these tools, do all these little tricks and things that I put up on here. And I know I've had people comment or message me before, like, "Oh, your thing didn't really help me." And it's like, well, I mean, even if it doesn't help you, at the end of the day, you're still going to have to figure out a way to sit and write that 90-page script or sit and write that 50,000 word novel. And doing my trick or my exercise or the tool that I have isn't going to accomplish that no matter how many times you do it. It's just the thing that's going to help you get a better idea of your writing or help it make it a little bit easier. But if you're not sitting in front of the laptop or on a notepad at least an hour or so a week, you're not going to get anything done. And it's really, really hard. And I think we've gotten to a place in terms of like how we consume, if we believe we consume a lot of stuff about writing, that we're accomplishing a lot about writing. And I think a big part of staying motivated this year is also stepping away a lot from your social media. I know I talked about that a bit last time, but I'm really going to emphasize it is really start weaning yourself off of the Instagram, off of the TikTok, off of the, I'm sounding like a boomer, off of TikTok, Instagram, anything you can. I'm not saying get rid of it all. If you can, that's great. But like, if you have to, just say, hey, the weekends are no social media days. Like, if you want to message a friend on Instagram, I know a lot of my friends use Instagram to message. Cool. But I'm not getting on Reels. I'm not going to like scroll through like the wall or the feed. I'm not going to do it. I'll message my friend if they message me on there, but that's about it. I'm not going to post on my stories. I am going to like really do away with that for the weekends. Even if you just do that, it's great. Same thing with YouTube. Like, try not to watch YouTube as often, which is like counterintuitive considering this is a YouTube channel. But to stay motivated, you have to declutter a lot of what you have distracting from your life and really refocus as best and as much as you can and really build more physical routines. Like being on our phones and watching YouTube and all that, that's not physical. That's not active. It's not action. It's really, really complacent and sloth like. And so I think we need to stay motivated. We got to be more physically active in the way in which we approach writing and uh, really wean and do away from the social media stuff as best we can. I know you can't completely detox off of it, but if you can set aside 2 days a week to really reduce your usage to 90% or 100% even, I really, really believe that's going to do wonders for you after a couple months. And really take the time to sit and write. Like, you just have to do it. There's no, like, all the tools and tricks in the world isn't going to help you really get to that 90-page mark or that 50,000 word mark. You have to sit down and write, and you just have to have radical acceptance of that. So hopefully this has been helpful. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Again, in the link, I'm going to have the Word doc and the PDF for the idea box or the story box, and give it a shot and just really, hit the ground running.